Welcome, everybody. This is a really wide room, so I'm going to do the best I can to kind of get all the way across here. Thank you guys for coming to the session. This is the Dig into the Skype Operations Framework session. Just by a quick show of hands, how many folks were in the session right before this one? Okay, and how many of you need oxygen tanks as a result of the long walk over here that you're all out of breath from? Okay, yeah, I was kind of the same way. All right, cool. So really the purpose of the session here today is to get a little bit deeper into the Skype Operations Framework all up. Yes, there are going to be some concepts that we talk about here that should be familiar to you from the last session if you were in it. If you weren't, don't worry about it. If you were, good reinforcement of some of the announcements that we made in the last session. But my intent here is to take you just a little bit deeper into some of the aspects of the framework itself, right, and what the outer loops and inner loops of the fun logo that you see here actually mean, how we kind of came up with those, what their applicability is, and then kind of take you through some of the applications of how we did it when we released the various versions of SOF, the first iteration being back in July, and the second iteration that we announced this week at Ignite. So our objectives today are to talk first about this concept of the cloud migration release, right? That is the release that we're talking about this week at Ignite. As you'll come to find out when we go through and discuss the framework is a living, breathing entity. We're constantly evolving it. We're constantly updating it. Sometimes there'll be minor updates that we do. Sometimes there will be major updates that we do. And this week is one of the major updates that we're going to be talking about with regards to cloud migration. We want to make sure that you guys walk away from this session understanding what the framework actually is, right? What its purpose in life is. It is a set of practical applications, practical guidance for end-to-end successful deployments of Skype for Business. It's not a replacement for product documentation, right? We still have all the nerd knobs documented out on TechNet for how you want to do all the various steps and so forth. This is taking it that next step further, right? How do I do practical applications of the things that I read on TechNet? What do I need to be thinking about outside of the click here, click here, click here steps that we can provide through our product documentation? We'll talk a little bit about this concept of customer journeys, right? Because of course, one of the interesting things when you look at the framework is, well, where do I start, right? And then once I figure out where I start, where do I go, right? Well, to be able to understand that, we have to know what kind of a journey you are on as far as, you know, getting yourself to Skype for Business, and then we can understand how we get you to that end state, and that end state is a successful deployment of Skype for Business. I will take you through a walkthrough of the framework itself and some of the offers and so forth. So again, key takeaways, be able to describe this framework, be able to describe this concept of offers and outcomes that we're going to talk through. Know where to go to get it, right? SkypeOperationsFramework.com. As most of you know, when it comes to naming products inside of Microsoft, we like short names. No, we don't. We make names really, really long. So SkypeOperationsFramework.com is the site that we want to hit. And then we want to understand how and why we can provide feedback, right? That's another critical aspect of the framework is we at engineering want to hear from you, customers, partners, whoever, to evolve what this framework provides, right? The framework is not meant to say these are the exact 100 things you must do in this order, right? That's not the intent, right? The intent is here's the practical application of how you get from start to finish successfully. Standard disclaimer, because I mentioned earlier that the framework is evolving, right? What I'm telling you today is a snapshot in time, right? This is where we are today with the framework. We're talking about this new cloud migration release. I'll talk a little bit about the get deployed option that we had back in July. 3 months from now, there'll probably be some new content, right? The idea of the framework is to constantly evolve. Well, same thing with the training, right? We have what we call the Skype Academy, which is where we go to get all of our readiness information with regards to the framework. So when you head out to the Academy, you'll be able to see a lot of the training and readiness around the initial release of SOF that we did in July, the current release that we're doing this week around cloud migration, and also the product-specific trainings that we have, things like Cloud Connector and so forth. So bookmark this site, because that's where you'll be able to come back to 3 months from now, 6 months from now, and always be able to get that latest and greatest evergreen content when it comes to SOF itself. So a little bit about me. My name is Brian Nice. I am a Principal Program Manager in our Skype customer experience and deployment team. My team is responsible for two major areas. My team is responsible for Academy. So the stuff that you see on the Academy site, the trainings, the readiness, all those aspects, my team handles that in conjunction with a number of resources that we have on our team that supply us the relevant content. And my team also handles the managed service provider relationships. So you'll see in a little bit when we start talking about soft partners and soft certifications and assessments and all those fun little nuggets. Yeah, that's me. That's my team. That's sort of the things that we're responsible for. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, we'll give you the quick recap on SOF and this concept of the shift to the cloud. We'll give you a quick recap on this concept of customer journeys. And again, for those of you that were in the intro session, the success session that we had earlier, some of this will look pretty familiar to you, but good to get a recap and get a good foundation for that. And then we'll dig into this cloud migration release and talk more in depth about what exactly we're doing there and how it relates to the framework. Once we get a chance to see it kind of live and in action, I want to pull us back a step and correlate it to the actual framework internals itself. So when we look at the wheel that you see on the left-hand side here, and you see things like plan, deliver, and operate, and then inside of that you see things like envision, assess, design, prepare. What does that mean? Why is it there? What's relevant? Does anybody care? We want to go through those internals and understand how we drew up this construct, why it's there, and how you can start applying the resources that we've released, as well as any resources or materials that you may already have into the framework itself. And then, of course, we'll wrap up with where you go, what's next, and, of course, our fun Q&A. So, the standard moniker, the standard disclaimer of how we came up with SOF was when we shift into the cloud, we had to rethink how we approach successful deployments of Skype for Business. I've been doing consulting and architect work for over 18 years, and when you get into the shift to the cloud, a lot of the things that you used to do in the traditional on-premises world don't work so well anymore. Right? Racking, stacking servers, deploying software, we don't do that anymore, right? It's still important, it's just been relegated somewhere else. That doesn't mean that there's less for us to do, it just means we have to shift our focus on what we do. That's when we started to think through this concept of the Skype operations framework to be able to say, how do we need to rethink the way that we do things? Because the traditional plan and deliver and operate that we used to call, or deploy, operate, I should say, that we used to call from our Microsoft operations framework days, doesn't really fit the bill in a cloud-centric world, right? Because there's not a lot to deploy. Yeah, there's clients to deploy and there's things here and there, but you're not deploying front-end pools. You're not deploying high availability in DR, right? The cloud service is providing that. So we needed to tweak that construct and get into this idea of delivery, right? Because that aligns with what we do both in the cloud and on premises, right? So when you think about this shift, right, one of the main reasons that we started to go this route was because of this idea of evergreen services in the cloud. Now, you are going to hear a lot about cloud, right, in this session. I want to make sure that we all understand that SOF is not specific only to cloud or to Office 365. Sure, the first couple iterations that we're going through have a pretty big focus on cloud for obvious reasons, right? But it's not only applicable to the cloud. We can take a number of these facets of SOF that we're going to dig into and apply it to the on-premises world. But the main thing that we had to get folks thinking about was this concept of evergreen services, right? Think about your traditional, on-premises Skype deployment. Well, let's even take the way back clock to Link 2013 days, right? You deploy Link 2013. How long was it between Link 2013 and Skype for Business? Not months, right? Not a couple of months, lots of months, right? So we had this long cycle to be able to get from Link 2013 to Skype for Business, right? You look at the cloud evolves much more rapidly than that, right? So we have to be able to have a process in place that allows us to get this life cycle mentality in play. That's what the framework is designed to do. To get us to think about life cycle, hence the concept of the circle, right? To think about life cycle approach, right? Not start, horizontal line, finish, done, walk out the door, but okay, I do plan, I do deliver, I do operate, and now something evergreen comes along. Hey, there's a new Mac client. Whoop. Plan, deliver, operate, right? I have to get that lifecycle mindset so that when these new features and new functions and new clients come out, I can assimilate them into my deployment in a successful manner. The center button that you see there, customer success, that's the end goal, right? We're not trying to box people into, as I said earlier, these are the 100 things you must do in a specific order. We're simply saying, this is the way that you need to approach your journey to Skype for Business. Now, where you are along your journey, well, that's going to depend on the customer or the partner, right? Maybe I'm just starting out. Maybe I already have a deployment on premises. Maybe I don't even know anything about Skype, right? So depending on where you are, you're able to take this construct of plan and deliver and operate all the way through so that we get that end goal of a successful customer deployment. So we talk about SOF, and the first thing we think of is, where do I begin? How do I start my journey? In this instance, how do I start my journey to the cloud? Well, clearly one of the first things we have to think through is, where are you in your journey today with regards to Skype? Are you greenfield? So I have absolutely nothing deployed with regards to Skype or Link Server 2013 or Link Server 2010 or any iteration thereof. Am I already online? Maybe I have Exchange online and I have a handful of Skype users online. Maybe I'm in a hybrid or thinking about getting in a hybrid state, right? Where I have an on-premises deployment and I have tens of thousands of users using it, but now I want to start transitioning on my terms, right? A small segmentation of the population into the online world. Maybe I'm just full on-premises today and I haven't even thought about hybrid yet. I'm just now realizing, hey man, I watched Gurdeep's keynote on Monday and there's some pretty cool stuff going on in there. I'd like to kind of dabble in that, but I'm all on premises today. What do I do next? Right? That's where we start. So assessing our current state. The next area that we look into is, okay, so I figured out my current state. I figure out I'm going to get to the cloud at some point. Well, how do I approach that? Right? Trying to do everything all at once could be painful. Right? Could be fun, could be painful. So a lot of times we'll see customers experiment by starting with things like the meeting and IM workload. Right? They tackle getting online conferencing, instant messaging, presence, and those pieces, and then they light up voice as necessary. Right? And that voice light up could be using our PSTN calling service that we have online if you're in the right geography. It could be using your existing on-premises environment. But we basically kind of look at this in a staged type approach. Hybrid is there to allow us to have cloud on our terms. Right? That is the goal of hybrid, period. Right? Hybrid is not something that we say, flip the switch, put in hybrid, and on Monday, everybody's on the cloud. Yeah, it doesn't usually work that way. Right? Hybrid is all about being able to establish that coexistence so that I can move to the cloud on my terms. Maybe I've realized today I have 10,000 users, but you know what? These 500 users right here are brilliant for the cloud. Right? What they do fits the cloud model perfectly. And this group of 50 people over here, they're contact center agents. Yeah, they don't fit the cloud yet because the cloud doesn't fit them feature-wise. So they stay on premises. These other people, they go. Right? That's the way that we start looking at this cloud on your terms construct. Obviously, to be able to do this, you now have to understand what the key dependencies are to make that happen. And then lastly, you then figure out, well, am I going to do this myself? Or could I leverage services like Fast Track if I have access to those benefits, our partner community, and of course, what we're all here to talk about today, the Skype operations framework. So your journey to the cloud, when we look at this in the construct of SOF, I think back to WPC, which was in July. Actually a few months before WPC, when we were concocting this idea of SOF and then consuming lots of caffeine to get this out the door. One of the first things we thought about was, what do we want to put in the first release of SOF? We came up with our wish list of things, and we're like, okay, that'll take us about 3 years. So what do we really want to put in the first release of SOF? Because there's a lot of gaps. Well, let's focus on the greenfield aspect, right? Let's focus on the Skype for Business online aspect. And we used the concept of get deployed. Right? So when you looked at the Skype operations framework back in the July timeframe, when you went to our site, we had an outcome there defined as get deployed. and we had a whole series of information that would allow you to go through our life cycle, start to finish, for how to properly deploy Skype for Business Online, specifically focused around Cloud PBX and PSTN conferencing. Now that Cloud PBX included all the flavors that we had of Cloud PBX. So PSTN calling, what we call on-premises PSTN connectivity, or hybrid voice, which the marketing guys hate, right? And also the ability to use Cloud Connector, right? All of that was covered in our initial release that we did back in the July timeframe. When we got into Ignite's timeframe, in the planning that led up to this and the execution that led up to this, the thought process was now, great, where do we go from here? Well, the next logical step was, how do you get migrated into online? We have a number of customers that are out there today that are running Link 2013 or running Skype for Business today. So how do we give the correct guidance, the correct practical applications for how to properly migrate from on-premises to the cloud? Now again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, we don't replace product documentation, right? So some of you may be looking at me going, yeah, Brian, seriously? There's documentation out on TechNet that tells me how to migrate from on-premises to the cloud. Why do I need this? True, there is documentation that's out there that gives you all of the specific nerd knobs that you need to turn for the migrations to work successfully. But which users are you going to move? Do you know how to run a persona workshop? Do you know how to identify users that are suited to go to the cloud? Right? Sure, we give you the technical steps in product documentation of migrate Bob's account. Great. Who's Bob? Right? Is Bob a user that's suited to go to the cloud or not? Right? Is the cloud even right for you before we even get to that step? Right? So that's where the framework fills the gaps, right? And provides that construct from the beginning to the end that allows us to go through envisioning workshops, assessing whether we're ready from an actual org perspective as well as from a network perspective and a technical perspective, right? So that's really the key when we start looking at the application of SOF, is augmenting that product documentation with practical guidance, tools, workshops, scripts, the whole bit. That's what we want to be able to do. So when I think of explaining SOF to people, I think of it as a multifaceted approach. Yes, in the top left quadrant, you see this concept of the framework. Yeah, we needed a blueprint that folks could follow and folks could reference, a taxonomy that we could use, so that when I'm talking to a customer and I'm talking about their journey to the cloud, and another partner is talking to a customer and talking about their journey to the cloud, we can speak the same language, right? When I talk about assessment, this is what I mean, right? How many of you have had the fun discussion where you want to do a network readiness assessment, and you talk to the networking guys, and what do they say? Probably not the same thing that the Windows guys say, which is not the same thing that these guys. Everybody has a different definition of what it is, right? Well, the framework defines for us what that is. So now we know, hey, when I, as a person that knows SOF, talk about a network readiness assessment, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Nothing's lost in translation, right? It's not, oh yeah, Brian's going to come in and run a tool that's going to gather all my iOS configs on my Cisco routers. No, I'm not. The reason I'm not is because the framework doesn't define it that way. That's not what we consider. So the framework is the taxonomy that we use to be able to define where a customer is in their journey to Skype for Business Online. Now the framework is great, but not very useful if you don't have a readiness component to go with it. Right? We release all of these assets. Fantastic. I've never run a readiness workshop in my life. I've never run an envisioning workshop in my life. How do I do that? We provide readiness materials that walk you through the assets that we deliver. Right? So rather than it just be, hey, go to this site and download 65 pieces of stuff and start skimming through it, hey, there's resources out there. Let's go watch the webinar so that we understand how we deliver this. And what do we need to know about delivering an assessment or delivering a readiness workshop or an envisioning workshop and so forth. The bottom two areas, customers and partners. SOF is designed to be consumed by anyone, right? A lot of times people looked at this and went, wow, you wrote this for the partner community, right? Yeah, but not just the partner community, right? Larger customers, smaller customers, IT pros, anybody should be able to go and consume the framework. That's the idea when we look at this. So I look at it through a couple of different lenses, right? When I start talking to SOF and I'm talking to customers, I have a very specific lens that I'm looking through. I'm looking through it with the customer's eyes. Customers don't understand things like offers and things that, they understand outcomes, right? What do I get out of this? What's my end result? So when I'm looking through the customer lens, that's the terminology that I use. Partners, different audience, right? When I talk to partners, partners understand the concept of offers. I'm going to sell you something. It's going to cost money, right? I'm going to differentiate myself. That's the lens that I'm going to use when I talk SOF to partners, but the end goal is still the same, right? Because we're rooted in that same framework, we all know what we're talking about, whether I call it an offer on one hand or I call it an outcome on the other hand, right? And that's where this pillar structure comes from, right? This is really to me, this is really the crux of what the framework itself involves. So look at this from the bottom up. Layers 1 and 2, phases and stages. All right, layer 1, plan, deliver, operate. Simple, right? That's the high-level phases. Now, we could have left it there, but think about it. Plan could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Plan what? Plan my network? Plan my client deployment? What am I planning, right? Am I planning to roll out Skype? Am I planning to figure out what Skype is, right? So just plan by itself wasn't enough, right? But the concept of PDO it resonates with people, right? People understand that in our industry. They understand what plan, deliver, operate means. So we went to the second layer and we said, well, let's subdivide that phases down into what we call a discrete set of stages, right? So like in plan, we have envision, assess, design, prepare. The idea here was to be able to more accurately depict where a customer is in their journey to Skype for Business and be able to associate at that layer, oh yeah, they're assessing their network. Great, they're in the assess stage. Oh no, they've already got that done. They're trying to figure out how they're going to interconnect PSTN to the cloud. Well, now they're designing, right? So I'm able to now start to figure out, envision, assess, design, prepare, where they are in that overall overabunding plan stage, right? And we've got some slides a little later that dig into those gory details when we get into SOF internals. Now, at layers 3 and 4, this is our recommended practices bucket, right? This is driven by a concept of what we call activities, right? The way that I look at this, no matter where a customer is in their journey, there's a certain set of activities that have to happen, right? We have to assess your network. We have to enable users at scale. We have to perform functional testing, right? These are activities. These are discrete activities that we need to run. Well, we take these activities and we map them to the corresponding stage, which corresponding phase, right? So now we know exactly where that activity falls in the broad spectrum of this deployment. And then within the activity, we define a set of tools and assets that go along with it. In some cases, it might simply be a workshop that we run, right, with a corresponding PowerPoint. For, say, enabling users at scale, it'll be a script, right, a PowerShell script that'll bulk enable your users, assign the correct licenses, assign their phone numbers, right, the whole bit. Boom, script, done, right, being able to automate things. So depending on what the activity is, we can determine what the corresponding tools and assets might be. Now, at this layer, I think of basically layers 3 and 4 as like this big chest, this big toy box that I have, right? I can literally go into this and pick out whatever activities I want to achieve my end goal. Well, what's my end goal? Well, that's the operational excellence layer, and that's where I put the correct lens on, the goggles on, right? Talking to customers, and I say, all right, what are your outcomes? What are your initiatives, right? What are you trying to achieve? I want to get my users to use, voice services provided by the cloud. Great. Measurable outcome. What is that going to be? I'm talking to a partner. Well, I want to be able to offer my services to them to be able to deploy cloud PBX and PSTN conferencing. Great. That's this operational excellence layer, right? And when I get into layer 5, that's where I'm defining what I want that outcome to be. Well, guess what? To achieve that outcome, what do I need to do? Specific set of activities, right? If I want to be able to deploy Cloud PBX with PSTN conferencing and all that fun stuff, there's a sequence of steps that I have to go through. That's a planned set of activities that I need to go through. I can just pick and choose what activities I want with the corresponding assets that come along with it, and boom, I'm ready to roll. When you get up to layer 6, that's where we get differentiation, right? From a partner perspective, not all partners are created equal. We don't want all the partners to be 100% identical to each other. We want them to provide their value add. So take the framework, take the construct, take the process, take the outcome, and put all your value add stuff on top. Yeah, we look at network readiness from the Skype for Business perspective. Oh, well, what about my wireless network? Oh, this partner over here does a great job with wireless assessments, right? Things of that nature, being able to differentiate yourself. So this is a snippet of what we released back in July. Not going to go through every gory detail here, but what I want to point out is you can see the way that we've structured this in alignment with the framework. In the top left, you see the offer or the outcome that we want to achieve. Right? So in this case, this is my get deployed. That's Cloud PBX, PSTN conferencing. I have a set of activities associated with plan, with deliver, with operate. And then underneath all of those activities that you see there in the kind of hard to read gray, right? Everything that you see there, those activities have corresponding assets and tools that go with them. You can basically go up to the site, grab all this info, follow it, and away you go. Right? Getting deployed with Cloud PBX, PSTN conferencing. As of this week, we expanded the information on SOF to include the cloud migration assets. Now we want to take a different approach, right? It's not just deploying the online stuff, it's taking what I already have today on premises and migrating that into Office 365. Right, so again, same idea. As you see this breakdown, you've got plan, you have deliver, you have operate. You can see in there a series of activities. Now, for those of you paying attention, right, you probably noticed some of the activities on there look kind of similar to the activities that we did before, right? Of course, assessing your network is still relatively important, right? We do it when we do get deployed. We do it when we do cloud migration. The cool thing about the framework is it's the same set of assets. We've just rebbed them to be able to include multiple scenarios here, right? So the idea being that these assets that you know and love that you've gone out and used back in July, now you get into cloud migration, you just grab the updated versions of the docs, the upgraded versions of the PowerPoints, the assets, the whatever, and away you go. Pretty fun to have this particular set of assets available to us now. Yeah, question?
So, since you added this, if you have partners who aren't registered their cloud deployment,
So the question is, now that we've released cloud migration, if I have partners that have not completed their training yet, will this impact that? So when it comes to training, up until this week, we basically had a requirement for partners to go in and attend all of the training sessions that were out on Skype Academy, which was a total of 17 trainings that we had for V1, for cloud migration, or excuse me, for Get Deployed. As of this week, we've now released the SOF assessment. So if they want to go watch videos, they can. They're available on demand through Academy. There's a new set of sessions that start next week, specific to cloud migration. They're welcome to go and watch those, but at this point, the measuring stick now becomes go past the assessment. So they can take the SOF assessment either through our site, or for partners, they would go and take it through the Microsoft Partner Network. Yep. Cool? Great. All right, so let's dig into some of the details of what we did in the cloud migration release. Now, what I want to make sure that we understand here, think back to, and it seems like a long time ago, but maybe about 10 minutes ago, when we were looking at the customer journey to the cloud, right? And we're thinking about, am I greenfield? Am I on premises? You know, where am I? The stuff that we're going to talk about here is specific to that scenario where the customer has said, or the partner has said, yeah, in this environment, we have Link 2013 deployed today, and we're looking to get into the cloud. The construct that we take through this applies across the board, whether it's greenfield or not. It's just as we start getting into the specific activities that I'm going to cover here, this is specific to that customer journey where they're trying to migrate into the cloud. So, where do I start envisioning the solution, right? This is one of the most critical aspects of any deployment for Skype for Business. It's envisioning what that solution needs to be, right? What are we solving for? What do we envision the end goal to be? All too often I've had deployments that have not gone well because they simply said, oh, we have Link 2013 today, well, let's migrate to Skype for Business. Why? Because it's new. Okay. Well, great, it's new. Why? What is it solving for you? Right? How are you preparing? What do you want that end goal to look like? I want it to look newer. That's not a good end goal, right? Envisioning the solution is not newer as its end state, right? Envisioning the solution is, what do we want this to look like? How is this going to change our business? What are my business goals? What are my OKRs, as we call them? What are my objectives and what are my key results? What are my key success indicators? How do I measure that what I did was good for my business or not so good for my business, right? I have to have a better measuring stick than, well, the users liked it or the users didn't like it. I can't measure that, right? I can feel the pain of it, but I can't measure it. I need to be able to document out what these are. And now you may look at this and go, I don't know what the heck a key success indicator is. Cool. SOF shows you what the most common key success indicators are for cloud migration, right? It's all part of our envisioning workshop that we have documented as part of SOF. Now again, that envisioning workshop, I'm talking about it here specifically in cloud migration, but it applies to the get deployed scenario too. So again, you're thinking of this customer that, yeah, they don't have anything on premises today. You can still run the exact same envisioning workshop, right? Because it takes you through that same mindset. Yeah, there's a couple of different levers that we pull because obviously they don't have an on-premises deployment, but we're trying to envision what the end state is going to be. Critical component to go through envisioning the solution. The next area that we look at is overall readiness. All too often, customers that I work with get stuck in the network assessment world. Because truth be told, we push it, right? For obvious reasons. But we can't overlook overall readiness. Is my customer, client, end user, whatever, are they ready for Skype for Business Online? And well, what does that mean to be ready? Well, first of all, let's get an understanding of what we call persona analysis. What are the types of people that are going to be using Skype for Business, and what is it that they do today, and how would that evolve to Skype for Business tomorrow, right? Key statement, how would that evolve to Skype for Business tomorrow? All too often I will have customers say to me, hey, I've got such and such PBX and it does these 10 things. I want the new solution to do those 10 things. Why? Your old solution already did those 10 things. Why don't you just stay with it? Because it already does the 10 things you want it to do. Oh, I'm sorry, you want to get out of the 90s and get into the present day? Let's rethink how you do things. Because there's no reason to put a version of a unified communications platform up against a legacy platform from 10 years ago and say, I want it to behave like that. That already behaves like that. Just stay with it, right? Let's look at our personas and figure out, how do these people actually operate on a daily basis, and how does that translate into the world of Skype for Business? As a result of that analysis, you might find out, I've got this segment of users, these personas, perfect sense to move them to the cloud, right? My use case in the engineering group, I am a remote worker, right? When I'm not gallivanting all over God's green earth, I'm out of my home office, right? I very rarely go into our offices. So my use case fits the bill really nicely for moving to the cloud. Because I'm everywhere, I'm mobile, I'm doing whatever, right? You have another segment of users that are sitting in a call center, and that's what they're handling, call volume day in, day out. Maybe not such a great persona use case to move to the cloud yet, right? Notwithstanding the fact that the cloud can't yet support the feature set that they want, but that's not a mindset that makes sense to move to the cloud. That's the idea of persona analysis. We don't expect you to sit down in cloud migration and go, I have 10,000 users, within 6 months, 10,000 users are going to be in the cloud. I mean, that'd be awesome, don't get me wrong, but that's not realistic, right? The realism is I have 10,000 users, and those 10,000 users are broken up into these 8 personas. And of these 8 personas, these 5 can go to the cloud. Right? These 3 can't go to the cloud. Maybe can't go to the cloud ever. Maybe can't go to the cloud yet because the feature set hasn't caught up with it. Or maybe the feature set's there, but you're just not ready to retrain your users, right, to be able to handle that move to the cloud. That's this idea of persona analysis. Of course, we also look at health assessment. A number of times I have had folks say, well, my on-premises deployment is junk. If I could just move it to the cloud, it would be all better. Yeah, about that, yeah. Maybe not. But we have to look at health assessment, right? Think about the concept of, garbage in, garbage out, right? If you have junk coming in, you're going to have junk going out. Well, if your on-premises deployment is junk, just trying to establish hybrid to get to online may not even work, right? So let's do a health assessment first and figure out, what do I have to work with here? I may find some things in the health assessment that make me go, dude, before we even get a chance to think about hybrid, we've got to fix this because this is blocking me from getting to the cloud. This is just not going to happen, right? So assessing my overall readiness goes above and beyond looking at the network. In fact, in this slide, we don't even talk about network because that is important enough to deserve its own slide, right? I've got to see if my organization is ready. Am I UC ready, right? Am I ready for universal communications? Because that's what the platform is. We're not an IM and presence chat program. We're not a conferencing service. We're not a PBX. We're a universal communications solution. All of those pieces working together in harmony is what makes the solution valuable. It's also what makes the solution difficult for folks to jump into because it's not what they do today. We have to make sure that they are ready for this before we spring it on them and say, why aren't you using Skype? You know how to use Skype Consumer, just use Skype for Business, the same thing. Yeah, not so much, yeah. It's almost like, that would be crazy, like if we just took the Link client and rebranded it or something. Oh, wait, so let's talk about network readiness. We can edit that out, right? No, just kidding. Yeah, please report to HR. So network readiness is critically important. There's no doubt about it. The problem with network readiness that I've faced in my life before coming to Microsoft, I worked for a partner. We were a Cisco partner. I did a lot of Cisco, CCNP, CCVP, voice and networking and security and all kinds of fun stuff. You learn very quickly that when you have a network engineer sitting across the table from you, you better be able to speak their lingo, right? And better be able to understand what it is that they expect because they have usually a completely different mindset than you do when it comes to network readiness, right? What happens when you have a network engineer sitting across from you? You say, is your network ready for UC? What do they say? Yep. Of course! Your application stinks. My network is fine. Okay? So let's double click on that, right? Let's figure out if we really are ready from a networking standpoint. Well, what does that mean? Well, in the aspects of the cloud migration offer, we took our existing assets that we had for network readiness and we revved them, we updated them to incorporate, number one, feedback that we heard from the community. Number two, we updated it to include new initiatives that we weren't able to get out the door in V1, right? We've also included some guidance around a very touchy subject called ExpressRoute. How many of you show of hands, know what ExpressRoute is? Awesome. How many of you think ExpressRoute is required for Skype for Business? Sweet, you're all wrong. So, seriously, we wanted to make sure that we put some guidance in there for ExpressRoute because the way I think of ExpressRoute, it's another tool in the toolbox, right? Just because I have a hammer doesn't mean everything looks like a nail, right? Just because I have ExpressRoute doesn't mean I'm going to put it out there everywhere because it's going to solve everything. No, there's this little thing called physics that kind of gets in the way that in some cases even ExpressRoute won't solve. So what we wanted to do in our updated guidance was provide a way to understand not only how would my network be ready as it stands today, but would ExpressRoute help? or not? Because how many of you in the room, quick show of hands, have actually ever deployed ExpressRoute? Yeah. It's fun, isn't it? Y'all know my definition of fun, right? So Brian's definition of fun, it's fun, right? Yeah, Yeah, it's not easy to deploy. So we want to make sure that it's the right thing before we go down that path, and we don't want to give the impression that you have to have it, because you don't, right? We have to run an assessment first to determine whether you need it or not. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but the default stance shouldn't be you must have it, because you don't. I work out of my house. I don't have an ExpressRoute connection to Office 365. I know. They couldn't approve it, so they tell me it's coming right after I get my Surface Hub. Yeah, so that's not going to happen. It's funny, they said I could put it on my expense report all I wanted. They just wouldn't approve it. So we want to have some guidance for ExpressRoute. We want to have some guidance on what traffic is actually generated by Skype for Business, right? You should all be familiar with the bandwidth planning calculator that we have, right? That's recently been revved and updated to include the Cloud PBX scenarios, right? So being able to run through essentials and do this planning calculation aspect so that we can tell network engineers, here's what we expect. And when they go, you can't turn video on because it's going to require 100 million gigawatts of blah. No, it actually is going to require this because I ran the numbers and it's math, right? It's not hard. So. Tools. Tools are always fun, right? We have a number of partners that have tools in market that can do network readiness assessments all day long when it comes to the on-premises world. I want to check my WAN, I want to check my wireless, I want to check the awesome. You know, you go to our website on SkypeOperationsFramework.com, you can go to our partners tab and you can see our soft partners that are there. Great. But we also want to be able to test connectivity to online. That one's tricky, right? And some tool providers have gotten kind of, you know, creative. Oh yeah, I'll stick a VM up in Azure and we'll send some traffic up to that and back. Yeah, no, it's not a good idea. Why? Because that's not the same path the Skype client's going to take. You're going to send it to the Azure data center. That's not where Skype is, right? We leverage in the Skype world, we leverage the ability to do media to its closest point. So you need to be able to have a way to test to the closest point. Well, we released a tool last session. Ali actually showed it, or at least showed where you can get it. In the networking session that they're going to do on Friday, Cornel's going to actually demo the tool for you, so you definitely want to get to that session on Friday, but I'll give you the quick synopsis of it. It's a way for us to be able to properly send the traffic paths from the customer's environment, from the customer's edge or from the customer's endpoint to the Office 365 edge. And by edge, I don't mean like edge server for Skype. I mean the ingress to O365. That's the proper path to test. And then we can measure that against our published guidance for networking. And I can at a glance run that and be able to see, yeah, you know what? That internet segment, sorry, doesn't meet the requirements. So you've got two choices. Well, you got more than two, but the two most obvious choices are, let's work with our carrier and see if we can engineer that circuit to be better. Because a lot of times they can. I remember I was on a project many years ago, and we had a circuit going from, I think it was Dallas, Texas to, I don't know, somewhere in Ohio or something like that. And we were getting some like 30 milliseconds of latency on the circuit. And we're like, seriously? It's like inside the continental US. This is just not, I mean, it's not even that far. You can do better. Nope, it's fine. Nope. And we argued and showed them logs and this and that. And like, okay, so we did some re-engineering, and let's see what it looks like now. Yeah, it's 8 milliseconds. Thanks. Right? But if we didn't say anything, we would have left it at that. We would run Skype over it, and it'd have been like, yeah, product stinks. Well, actually, no, the network stunk. And we proved it by showing them traces, showing them this, showing them paths, and they're like, oh, yeah, we can optimize that. That might be all it takes, right? We may run the numbers and look at it and go, yeah, you know, the way you're architected, the way this goes here and goes here, blah, maybe it makes sense to put ExpressRoute in. That's part of what we do with this testing, right? But to be able to make those decisions, you need data. You need to be able to quantify this down and not make it an emotional discussion. My network is good or not good. No, I want data. Data is going to tell me whether the network is good or not, right? So we give you a tool that can help with that. And our tool partners are coming along with that same mindset, right? And you'll see them updated on our soft site as they update their solutions to be able to handle the online aspects as well. Of course, we better give you some guidance on how to interpret that stuff. It's kind of important, right? So that's included in soft, the same token. So we get out of the assess phase. We figure out that our org is ready. We figure out that our network is ready. We've gone through envisioning. We know what the end result's going to look like. We've already started talking through what our adoption strategy is going to be as we get into execution of that coming up here. I got to figure out what the solution's actually going to look like. Now I've got to design it. Well, we have, of course, design guidance for Cloud PBX and PSTN conferencing. That was part of the initial release that we did way back in July. And again, that included all flavors of Cloud PBX. PSTN calling, the on-premises connectivity with an existing Skype deployment, and the Cloud Connector Edition. We've expanded this design to also include the architecture for coexistence and migration. So what are the things I need to be thinking about when I go to establish hybrid between my on-premises deployment and the cloud? What are the rules that I have to follow? What are the topologies that we support, right? And then what do I do about my clients? This one gets forgotten a lot. But what do I do about my client versions, right? We all know inside of the Skype engineering group that at the end of the day, the best experience that you're going to have is with the latest client. That's easy for us to say, because when it comes to execution, how easy is it to actually ensure that you've deployed the latest client? Well, it depends, right? What are you using? Are you using click to run? If you're using click to run, what channel are you on? If you don't know what that is, then uh-oh, right? Are you using MSI deployments? Are you on 2016? Are you on 2015, which is actually 2013, but then updated with the, right? So what do I do with my clients? And when do I upgrade my clients? At what point? We've got to think of that. Plan and document how we take care of our clients when we migrate to Skype for Business Online, right? It's a key component. Because again, at the end of the day, if I do everything right on the back end, and I don't take care of my end users, and they don't like the deployment model, or they don't like the way the client works, or they can't do their job, fail, right? I don't have a successful deployment. Can't forget about the client side. Deploy, migrate, rollout. Oftentimes, this is where folks jump in right out of the gate. They get here and they go, let's just set up hybrid. Where's that TechNet doc? Just go, hey, run that PowerShell command. It looks like it worked. Hey, what happened to all the users? we have to go through these earlier stages before we can get here. But now that we follow the process, now we get to deployment guidance. All right, what are the activities, step by step, that I need to do? What are the things I need to prepare for, step by step, to be able to deliver service to my end users? That service could be, like we show on the slide here, dial tone, right? What do I need to do to get this deployed? It could be, if I'm doing Cloud PBX and PSTN calling, I've got to provision the number, right? So I've got to get the number from the service. I've got to make sure I've got that all set up, and then I've got to provision the license to the user. I've got to provision the number, and maybe they're doing dial-in conferencing and they want a number out of Los Angeles. I got to get them the right number, right? I got to plan all of that out ahead of time, but then I've got to execute that in a particular order. In the migration world, we have the concept of site rollout and migration playbooks. We've got a slide that details this a little bit more coming up, but how do we handle the site-by-site basis? Right? Again, at the end of the day, if you have 10,000 users in your organization spread across 50 sites, it's not realistic to think that that's going to get done all at the same time. It isn't. And again, maybe you do your persona analysis and you find out, hey, out of the 50 sites, we've got 20 sites that could go right now. Great. You're not going to do 20 sites all at once. So what is the playbook that you use to do site-by-site migrations? And then testing guidance. How do I do proper testing, right? Soft provides a testing matrix, a document that you can run through that provides use cases for you to do functional testing, right? This is not just the typical smoke test of, hey, he signed in, right? But am I actually able to go through and do the things that need to be done? Now, you can, again, take this guidance and run with it, or you can take this guidance and augment it, right? Perhaps as part of your envisioning and part of your planning, you've discovered a couple of use cases that we maybe don't have documented in there. And you have very specific use cases that you want to test against. Great, add it in, right? Take that version of the documents that we have, add in the extra pieces that you need, and now you're ready to roll. Speaking of that site rollout and migration playbook, it's just that, right? It is a playbook for planning and executing site-by-site deployment and migration activities. What do I need to do at a site to transform it to Skype for Business, right? Here are the things I need to do. Here's the checklist of things. It's basically a big old Excel spreadsheet that you can sift through and figure out, these are the things I need to do. Here are the steps that I need to do. And if applicable, we'll even provide links to TechNet guidance or other soft documents or soft assets that will help guide you through the actual execution process. The idea of this playbook is to cover not only what you would normally associate with a cutover, like what do I do with my users, right? But what do I do about peripherals? Are they using phones, like physical handsets or not? Are they using certified headsets? If they are, great, where do we get them? If they're not, why aren't they, right? How do we figure out what the end user state is going to look like? How do we handle adoption and training, both before and after? Right? In some instances, I've worked with customers where they have the users go to kind of like a half-day training session, and while they're in that training session, that's when they're migrating their account. So that when they come back from the training session, they sit down at their desk and, look at that, what I got trained on, I now can use, right? Maybe that lines up for you, maybe it doesn't, but this playbook is talking about those aspects and making sure that you understand how to handle the adoption and the training aspects, right? How do we handle that pre-launch, launch day, post-launch day support, right? Do we have somebody on good old-fashioned SneakerNet, walking around and making sure with white glove service that they're helping people get their phones set up, right? Do we have Post-it notes out there? What do we do to ensure that the users are comfortable with the transition? Where do the users go when they have problems? How do they give feedback? Hey, that worked well. Hey, that didn't work so well. So that we can incorporate that into the next site that we do. Right? All of that being documented out in this migration playbook, this site rollout and migration playbook. Enabling users at scale. Right? Going into the web admin for Office 365 and enabling a couple of users, it's really straightforward. Right? A couple clicks and away you go. Do that for 1,000 users. Well, if I'm getting paid by the hour, it's probably not that bad. But there's got to be a better way to do it. Enabling users at scale is all about automation. Right? So as part of the assets that we have in the framework, we have PowerShell scripts to help us enable and migrate our users. This includes being able to set phone numbers and voice policies as necessary. Again, if you're deploying the voice workload, then you would have the ability to call these features in the script. Have it be a containerized PowerShell script that gives you the option of saying, hey, I want to use this script, and the users are already in the cloud, so I just want to enable them. Or I want to use that same script, but I want to call it to migrate users, so that it'll migrate the user account from the on-premises world into the cloud for me, all as part of this PowerShell script. It's a pretty neat script, and we do have comprehensive guidance and training sessions out on Skype Academy. Right? Now, the version that's on Skype Academy today is the consumable version for V1, the first version of the script that we released in July. There is a new training that's going to be happening within the next week or so. I forget what day it's on, but you can go to the Academy site now and register for that to be able to see how the script has been updated for you to be able to use in the migration scenario. Developing habitual use. Adoption is key. I always refer to adoption as developing habitual use. Right? Too often, customers and IT pros and folks refer to adoption as training. I just need to train them how to use it. No, you don't need to just train them how to use it. You need to help them develop habitual use. Right? Being able to use that platform day in and day out to get their work done and to improve the way that they collaborate. So we give you ways to plan for the adoption readiness. We have a new adoption portal that runs through our Fast Track Center that gives you access to more adoption resources that you can leverage. There is a central content directory. All of this comes together to help you drive that end goal of deep habitual use of the platform. That's what we're going for, right? We want folks to understand how they need to use the system so that they can continue to evolve and use it on a daily basis, right? Now, we talk about developing habitual use here. This is kind of the execution portion of it, right? Really, when I think about adoption, it runs across the entire framework, right? You need to be thinking about adoption all the way back when you're planning, right? When we talk about readiness, assessing overall readiness, there's some adoption pieces that come in there, right? The key success indicators that we talk about, they're triggered around adoption, right? Because that's how we're going to know if people actually are using it by some of our key success indicators. We've got, X percentage of people that are actually using the platform. We call it monthly active usage, for example, in O365. Monitoring is kind of important, right? Being able to manage call quality using our call quality dashboard. You can leverage that in the on-premises world. You can manage that in the online world. We'll take it a step further with the Skype Advanced Analytics portal that they demoed in Geo's session earlier this week, over the coming months and so. But being able to manage call quality and monitor my solution is critically important. And I need to be able to see it on both sides. I need to be able to see what's going on in the on-premises world, and I need to be able to see what's going on in the online world. I also need to be able to get through this operate state, right, into this support mindset and into this reporting and run state. So now I've gotten users moved over. Well, how do we do support? How do we provide guidance for troubleshooting, right? What are some of the things that the IT pros need to know on troubleshooting? What are some of the things that we provide guidance on from a support perspective? Like, hey, you should set up a split tunnel for your VPN users. So go read the document that we wrote on how to set up a split tunnel, right? Things of that nature. How do we provide that guidance to give you that ability to provide support and troubleshooting guidance as necessary? This includes online, hybrid, mobile, desktop, Mac, the whole bit, right? We want to be able to include all these bits and bobs. And as you've probably seen throughout the week, you may have heard, we've got a new Mac client coming, right? The framework is already being revved to include all the relevant new Mac stuff from a readiness perspective as well as from an asset perspective, right? So our intent is when this solution hits GA or general availability, we have the framework ready to go so that you can pull the assets that you need and be able to successfully get that new component deployed. Usage, reporting service usage. How do we know if the users are developing habitual use or not? Well, we need some reports. We need data. We need to figure out are they actually using the solution or not, right? Being able to measure usage. We can leverage the canned reports that you have inside of the Skype for Business Activity Center, right? We then need to be able to figure out if the usage velocity is matching our envisioning results. So I did my envisioning workshop, and I said my ramp rate was going to be X% over time. And now I run some reports, and I see that I'm woefully under that. Uh-oh, that's not good, right? I'm not trending well with what I envisioned. I envisioned by month 3 we would be at this level, and we're only at this level. I've got to fix that delta. Why am I missing this? Is it something in my adoption materials that I'm missing? Is it a technical issue? Is it a quality issue? Right? So being able to figure out, and you've got a decision tree here, like identifying the source of low usage. Well, if it's adoption, let's go fix that. Go figure out what's wrong with our adoption strategy and fix that. Maybe it's a technical issue or a call quality issue, right? Go back and figure out if it's something related to the design we did, or did we miss a step in the assessment of the network? Did we miss a remediation piece of the assessment of the network, right? Which is all part of the life cycle approach, right? Maybe I need to go back and run that again and see what's changed. All of this helps us drive to that reporting number so we can see whether people are actually using the service or not. Of course, there's some day-to-day operations that we've got to figure out as well. What are the daily, weekly, monthly tasks that we need to do? What do we do in the patch management world, right? How do I handle ongoing patch management in the on-premises environment? Because again, remember, when you get into a hybrid state, it's not about being in hybrid for a week or being in hybrid for a couple of weeks. You might be in hybrid for a year or multiple years, who knows, right? So we need to be able to understand how that service evolves over time because it's cloud on your terms. And maybe your terms are 18 months down the road. I don't know. Well, there's going to be a number of cumulative updates that come out in that window, so you've got to be able to know how you're going to handle that from a patching and methodology perspective. So that gives you or it should at least give you a little walkthrough of how we've approached the cloud migration aspect. The next set of slides I'm going to go through relatively quickly, which really just cover the internals of SOF, but I wanted to make sure that I covered the aspects of how we approach this in its real-world deployment model before we get into kind of the internals and theory of how we laid the framework out. So when we look at SOF all up, right, we have these outer loops that we call plan, deliver, and operate, right? As we said earlier, most folks know PDO as plan, deploy, operate. We tweaked it to be deliver because it makes more sense. And this provides us that higher level understanding of how we get to a successful end goal for a customer. But inside of that, we wanted to further break down the various stages. So here you see plan, deliver, and operate all being broken down into their respective stages. And the one that we try to call out is what you see at the bottom there for adoption. Yes, if you look at the deliver phase, there is an adopt stage. That is really the execution of adoption happening at that state. But when you think about adoption all up, you really need to look at it across all 12 stages inside of the framework, which is why down at the bottom we put the little block of adoption that kind of goes across all three. Because realistically, you can't wait until you're already into the deploy, enable, adopt to now start thinking about, I wonder how my users are going to use this. Uh-oh. That's why you end up having shelfware. Right? That's why we have a lot of customers today that own Skype for Business and don't use it. Because they turned it on and said, people will figure it out. It's organic. No, it isn't. Users are end users, right? They're going to do what they do, and if they don't know what to do with it, they're not going to use it. And if they don't see the value in it or how it helps them do their job any better or any more streamlined, they're not going to do it. So adoption needs to happen early. So we figure out what we're measuring against and how we're going to roll this and what it's going to look like so that when we get to the actual adopt stage, we're just executing like a well-oiled machine, right? That's the idea. So when you look at the various stages, right, it's really meant to convey a set of activities that we would see normally happening through these stages, which helps us to, again, pinpoint where a customer is and what things they should be thinking about. It also helps our partner community pinpoint where resources and assets that they already have fit into the framework, right? Because there's a number of partners out there that look at our framework and go, yeah, I've been doing this for the last 20 years. Yeah, we know. We didn't say this is revolutionary, right? This is just a matter of actually getting this documented out so that we can align to a singular story from end to end, right? So envisioning, being able to run envisioning workshops, adoption success workshops, right? Assess, doing network readiness, for example. Design of what is my cloud connector architecture going to look like. Preparing, right? Getting those network changes in place as remediation tasks, say, from the assess phase. Getting my list of users per site. Right? These are all common activities that we see, and then we associate a set of assets to go along with those activities. And you as an end user, you as an IT pro, you as a partner, can go and grab these assets and use them exactly as they are. Or you could look at them and go, yeah, I already got something like that. We already have an envisioning workshop. Great, does your envisioning workshop have the same end results as ours? Yep, fantastic. Use your envisioning workshop, go do what you do. Hey, you know what, mine has these things, but we don't have a lot of that cloud stuff yet. Well, we do. Take our cloud stuff and put it in yours, right? That's the idea of the framework, right? It provides that foundation that folks can glom onto and have that defined end result. Deliver, same way, right? We've got our deployment stage, getting our end user acceptance testing out there. We have enabling users with scripts that we can do in PowerShell. We have adopt, that's the actual execution of adoption, right? Getting our champions trained up and making sure they know what they're doing, get our end user adoption workshops going. We have the enhance stage. This is an interesting one, right? Because enhance, new functionality that comes aboard. How do we leverage that? How do we use that? Think about, on Monday they demoed the organizational auto attendant and the call queues feature that we have now and that we're going to be having shortly in Cloud PBX. Well, that's an enhanced feature. Well, it's going to require a little bit of thought process because now you may have a new batch of users, a new persona set that get migrated to the cloud. Okay, well, how do you handle those folks getting migrated to the cloud? Oh, now they're going to be part of a call queue, and something's going to come in, and the toast might look different. Are you going to make sure that they understand what it is that they see, and they don't go, who's that calling me? Hang up, and then, they didn't answer the call that they were supposed to get because it looked like malware or something, right? Make sure that you know that they know what they're getting into as these new features evolve and as new workloads come to life. Operate, doing things like the daily, weekly, monthly tasks that we need to do. Support, how do we troubleshoot? Right? I mean, sometimes it's the simple things. How do you do basic troubleshooting? How do you get logs? Where are the logs? What is Snooper? How do I use this thing? Where do they go? Right? So being able to do some basic troubleshooting. Monitoring. My user said that call quality was horrible. Okay, give me data. Let me go see that data. Let me do some trend analysis so that I can see, man, that office was really good for the last 3 months. And then suddenly last week it went in the toilet. What happened? Oh yeah, they replaced a couple of the network, routers and whatnot, and they put an old config on there. Our Quaz stuff went out the way, went out the door. Okay, well, Link, Skype, we're the canary in the coal mine, right? We discover these things. Wasn't our fault. We get blamed for it. It's okay. But we do monitoring. We look at this. We establish these trends and we figure out, yeah, I can root cause that. And yeah, you know what? It's this. And hey, you know what? We need to do a better job of configuration drift and make sure that when we replace these things, they get the right config back on them so that you don't mess up my application, right? Service health reports, right? Are things bad because there's a problem in the service? Whether the service is online or whether the service is, on premises, right? Understanding service health. Right? So these are examples of activities that you will see associated with the various stages, and then underlying and underpinning these activities are all the various assets that we have. Workshops, PowerPoints, documents, tools, scripts, all kinds of goodies that can latch on to these various activities. This is a quick snapshot that shows some of the asset types that you'll see inside of the framework. Now, obviously, you're not going to see every one of these for every activity, but it just depends on what type of activity it is. So obviously, the activities like enabling users at scale is going to be things like scripting, whereas the envisioning workshop is going to be more PowerPoint-driven, more documents of questionnaires that they can fill out and so forth. It'd be kind of cool if we could have a script that did an envisioning workshop for us, but I don't think that's going to make it. So, right, and that wraps us back around to the idea of execution excellence, right? It's a recap of what we saw earlier. The framework, everything from layers 1 through 4, is the tool chest that we have. But those top layers is what drives what things we pick out of the tool chest, right? If my outcome is migrating from on-premises Link 2013 to Cloud PBX with PSTN calling, then there's a discrete set of activities I need to pull out of that tool chest to make it work. If I'm doing Cloud PBX with PSTN conferencing straight up greenfield, different set of activities. Maybe some the same, right? But some other activities that I need to pull out that will drive us to that particular outcome. So now what? Where do I go? Go to the Skype Operations Framework site if you haven't already. There's a wealth of information here, right? And we've helped you go through this, or we will help you go through this by giving you a quick start option. Ali kind of covered that in the last session, so you can go back and take a look at the recording for that. Or you can just simply go to this site and hit the big quick start button that you see on the main page. That'll help you get through the correct set of activities and assets based on the outcome that you desire. Second, go to the Academy. Bookmark the page. Right now there are 11 training events that will be listed on top. That is the new set of trainings around cloud migration that will be starting on Monday, October 3rd. Go and register for those now. Those are live Skype meeting broadcasts that we will do over the next couple of weeks starting on October 3rd. There's also a separate set of 17 sessions that you can consume on demand. That was from the V1 release that we did. And then there are also sets of product training. There's a couple of trainings out there on Cloud Connector all up. If you don't know what Cloud Connector is, there's also a session on Cloud Connector 141, What's New, if you know what Cloud Connector is and you just want to figure out what we did different in the latest release. Right? All available for you through the Academy on demand. You can also go to the Academy to take your SOF assessment. Right? You get a series of questions. It's going to ask you about the framework. It's going to ask you about how we actually consume and use the assets in the framework. We'll ask you some questions about the product. Right? It's all there to kind of gauge your understanding of this end-to-end methodology. Also on the site, we have a list of SOF partners. So there are a set of partners that are trained and aligned to the Skype operations framework. There are hundreds of organizations that have gone through the training. There are a number of 8 currently on the site that have offers in market that are aligned to the Skype operations framework, with many more coming through the pipe. Right? So you can always come back to the site to be able to see, I need some help from a partner. Where should I go? Right? Well, a great place to start is here to see if the partner has an understanding of our framework and an understanding of the assets that we have. We also have a community that we want to get folks involved in, right? We will have folks involved in the community, not only from the partner's perspective, from the customer's perspective, but also from engineering, right? We have folks in engineering that participate in these community forums, right? So we want to be able to ask questions about a particular asset, or how I do this guidance, or how I do this, how I do that. You can ask it on the community, right? The guys that wrote and own SOF will be out there, right? The folks that own Academy, me, my team, will be out there, right? We'll help answer questions that you might have. It's also valuable to use this to help contribute ideas back into the community, right? We can do idea submissions through community. We can do it through feedback that we have on the SOF site as well. Key point being, we want to hear from you so that we can figure out how we improve. What did we miss the mark on? What did we get pretty well, but we need to add a few other bits in, and what's working really well? Because that's how we arrived at where we are today with Ignite's release. We looked at the feedback from V1, and we went, yep, that's a pain point. We need to fix that, or we need to fill that gap. Great, let's do it. Now, we can't boil the ocean. We're not going to fix everything all in one release, but let us know what we need to work through, and we can prioritize it, and we can get these pushed out the door. So recap, right? We talked about SOF, the core components of it, why we need it with this whole idea of shifting to the cloud. We looked at the concept of the customer journey, being able to understand where the customer is today and, more importantly, where they want to get tomorrow. We introduced the cloud migration release and took a big walkthrough of what that looks like, had a chance to dig into our SOF internals, and of course we ended up with, where do we go next? And I made it with a couple of minutes to spare for Q&A. I'm going to throw a few other slides up here just for completeness. If you all saw the launch on the keynote on Monday, they demoed the new Skype room systems. So here's your chance if you want to try to win one. This is how you do it. So stop by the booth. I'll put that back up in a second. We do have some other related sessions. Definitely want to check out the Friday session for deploying ExpressRoute if you want to see how the tool that we released is going to work. And give Cornel a hard time. And join the community. Always a good idea. And with that, I want to thank you all for hanging out with me. I know it's late in the day, so thank you very much for coming. I'll open it up to Q&A, and I hope you guys had a great session. No questions from you. SOF community, yes. Yeah, aka.ms/SOF community will take you straight to the SOF community. Yeah, question. Question is, are they considering bringing this methodology to any of the other ones? We actually talked jokingly about we should go work in the HoloLens group so we can have Hoff, and then we can get, a little bit, no, sorry. So, no, I mean, not as of yet, but we're hopeful. So. Yeah. Can I jump back a slide? Absolutely, yeah, so you can, oops, sorry. Sorry, there we go. Cool. Yeah.
Regarding network,
Yes.
providing us as a partner or with templates or the network delivering it or to the customer.
Yeah, the question was, are we providing templates for how to deliver the network assessment to the partner? Yes, in SOF we cover, so there's essentials and there's advanced. SOF covers essentials and how to deliver that and how to do the tool and all that bit. We don't cover the advanced piece because advanced is where we look to partners to fill in the gap for, if they want to do a wireless assessment or WAN or what have you. That's when we push that off to the partners for their guidance. But we do give you the guidance for the essentials piece. Yes. Cool. All right. Yeah. Yeah, I'll go back one more slide as well. So, great. Thank you, everybody.